It's another episode of the Better Learning Podcast. I am joined with Kelsey Jordan, who's been a previous guest of the show, but we wanted to bring her in, highlighting some of the next generation that's coming through the industry that's making an impact in education from supporting side on the architecture design side. Kelsey, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today. We're super excited to be back.
I know. It's like continuation. I feel like we've gotten to know each other fairly well, like a handful of times at different like random meetings, conferences. And it's always great to hear what you're working on and the passion that you have behind the work that you do. So I want to start at the beginning though. Like what was school like for you?
Oh, so for me, school's good. School came easy for me. So I was not the kid who struggled. I was the kid who got the straight A's, who was in the top 10 in the high school, who was accepted to Illinois Math and Science Academy, but didn't go. So I did good in school, which is almost makes me feel like the oddball out. But school was not always easy because of it. School was what it was there, and I had
Why do you think you did good? I want to hear that.
Grades. Well, the grades proved that I was doing good by their standard of what you were getting graded on for that aspect of school.
Is that what motivated you though? Like, were you in school because you felt the reward of getting the good grade?
I wanted to be the smart one. I wanted to know. And I had that innate curiosity of wanting to know what was going on and how things worked and how they used to work. And so I really enjoyed understanding what things were and how. Spelling, though, no. We could have left that where it was. And no.
Yeah, but that clarified, because I didn't know if you were saying you had this genuine interest in learning, or if you were genuinely interested in just getting those good grades to feel like I'm doing schooling well.
Yep.
Yeah, it sounds like you got that genuine interest. Where do you think that came from?
Well, my mom's a teacher as well. So my mom was going to school while raising us, and going to school to become a teacher during that time. So there was always that emphasis of getting good grades. And my dad and uncle were on the school board. And so always trying to be that upstanding person that my parents and family were representing for us to be. So there was that as well going on. And then where I grew up, all 7 of us grandkids were in the same school. Not always at the same time, but we were all there as well. So everybody knew who we were, and living in a small town,
a little bit of reputation.
Yeah. Yep.
What small town? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Bartonville, Illinois, which is right out of Peoria.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So sounds like school was a big focus. Like at what point in your K-12 career did you start thinking like what your next part of life looked like, or like education looked like? So
I started thinking more about it in high school, about what we were going to do. And so I grew up and went to a unique high school where they had a very strong CTE program. Very, very strong. Never had gotten rid of it. But I also, I really liked math and science quite a bit and enjoyed drawing and creating. So I was in Project Lead the Way classes right at the get-go, and then was able to get into the co-op program on my senior year of high school and work for Caterpillar at that time, and then go to school the other half of the day.
That's cool.
While doing that, yeah, super cool. And I got exposed to architecture during that. And I can't say that there was ever some epiphany of, yeah, this is what I'm going to do for architecture. But I was looking for something that had drawing and math connected. I just wanted those together. And that ended up being what I found was architecture,
Yeah.
and it just made sense.
Yeah. So did you go to college specifically looking to become an architect?
I did. So I have a unique education path in that sense where, because I was working for Caterpillar and they had offered to keep me on after I graduated high school, I went to a community college for 2 years specifically for architecture. And then from there transferred to Southern Illinois University. So I was very specifically going for architecture at that time.
Okay. So it sounds pretty straightforward then. After college, you went and worked architecture. Did you know you specifically wanted to be focused into education, or what was that thought process like?
I did. I wanted to be involved with education. So I had been working on education projects and was like, this is great. I love this. This just makes sense. And there was always something about it that was like, this just makes sense. I get it. I understand exactly what this should be and how to integrate all these different aspects to it, and how, oh my gosh, you can make a huge difference to multiple people and to multi-generations from being involved in a school, being involved in that aspect. And so that was so exciting. And my thesis when I was in grad school was on schools as well, and how architecture can combat obesity through educational environments and food deserts, and really understanding how schools can become, again, that center of a community and be that epicenter. And how cool would that be to then make school a great place for everyone and not just those people who get those straight A's. So how cool would that be?
Yeah. You're like one of the rare ones that I talked to that like knew what you wanted to do, actually went and did it, and now are in that career that you set out to be. Now that you're doing it, I want to hear like what surprises happen. Like are things kind of what you expected to be like now that you are working with schools as your clients and designing and building new schools?
Yeah. So I think there's going to be always continuous surprises. So when we think of school design and where schools were, we know something more today than what we knew yesterday, than what we knew a year ago, than what we knew 5, 10, 20 years ago. So it's always evolving of how to integrate that curriculum and that scale into the classroom. And so I like it, especially some of my most favorite moments are talking with people and understanding this isn't the same school. This isn't the same that you went to. Yes, okay, fine. I can empathize with you. I went to a non-AC school. We didn't have AC, but the kids have that now. And, guess what? We didn't have much technology either, because I grew up and remember a day when there wasn't an internet just like you. And so, but that's not now. So how do we keep going and progressing forward? So that's pretty cool. But I think there's been other points in my career where it's been a good chance to step back by listening to kids and listening to their responses and how they're working with us to understand what lens they're looking at schools through. So that's been really interesting too.
Yeah. So tell me more of like as you've been working on projects and things you're doing, what are the things that kind of get you fired up, or the things that like you get most passionate about, where maybe other people just aren't seeing it, but because you've had this focus really from kind of the beginning of going to architecture, knowing that you would interest into the educational environments. What are those things that get you worked up? So
I really want to focus on equity in the built environment and leveling the playing field for everyone, because we know that there are better schools out there than others. But why is that? And that's not fair for kids who don't get to choose who their parents are and what their parents' choices were, so where they live. That's not fair. Just because where they live, they get to go to a less school? No. So trying to figure out how to level that playing field has been interesting.
And are you doing primarily projects in Illinois?
I am now. However, I worked in Missouri for quite a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm always curious, like, working in two different states, like, did you notice a difference, or did kind of both of those states kind of operate in a similar way?
They operate in a similar but different ways as well. There's always the different politics behind schools everywhere you go, but that's even rural to suburban to urban and community-wise. So yes, but I think across states, because I do work in Iowa as well, and Indiana as well, that there's always that innate idea of wanting to have your kids have better than you. So how do we capture that? And how do we capture the passion that is behind our community's feelings of that? So that's always good. That's always there. That's an underlining idea.
Yeah. So tell me some of the findings that you had. Like, what are the approaches that you're taking with, because we from our side of it, because my team we always say we want to be involved as early as possible. We're never involved as early as the architect, though. So they're having kind of those very, like, the initial discussions with the school leaders and trying to figure out, like, how do we approach this? What do those conversations look like? Oh,
I like it when they look very collaborative. And when we're pushing for even a more collaborative aspect of bringing in the end stakeholders and bringing in community members and bringing in students, because I want to talk to the student in the back of the room that's unengaged. Because, we could say that this straight A student, yeah, they probably could do okay anywhere that they're at. But the student that's in the back of the room, it's not working for them for some reason, and they may know why it's not working. Or they could talk to you about how, it'd be really great if I could see the board, if I could hear, or it'd be really good if I was understood. That I'm just not understood. What I need is just not understood, which makes sense when you start thinking about different educational theories that are out there, because everybody learns differently. And we have to engage every type of learner through the process to keep everybody engaged. Because I believe that once we stigmatize schools as being this horrible, awful place that we hate, then that could start trickling down into multiple generations. And it has a lasting effect on that one person's life, too, if, say, they don't finish high school. What does that mean to them? And what does that mean to their future paths as well? So I want to capture all of those lenses in that gathering phase of working with the school to understand what they need. What they truly need, and are we missing anything?
And the big theme of this podcast is to talk about is how do we break down those silos? And because I think there's a lot of times, like conferences that you and I have been to, where we're talking about it, but then we're not always connecting and getting the voice of, like, the reality from the school leaders. So I'm always kind of curious to hear of, like, how much are the school leaders coming to you and say, like, this is what I want, or are they looking to you and say, like, can you help us figure out what's next? Like, I get there's always this collaboration and balance, but I get a very different kind of viewpoint based on who the audience is, and I feel like there's a lot of research and a lot of focus from the architecture side of it and design where we're looking at data and we're doing this, but sometimes we're educating the educators and trying to, like, break down that wall of how does it not feel that way? How can they actually say this is what we're trying to accomplish? But I don't know what those early conversations look like in that, in the room.
Well, you have to make it fun. Nobody wants to not have fun. So
Right. Yeah.
you have to make the process fun and collaborative. So that's where, as not only an architect but an educational planner, we can start going in there and talking and trying to speak their language with our understanding of curriculum and design theories as well, and say, okay, we understand that you have this portrait of a graduate. And we understand that you want to hit your whole child aspects. So what are those? And okay, let's be really honest. Do you think that this classroom's doing that right now? Maybe not. So, but what? And instead also of going, okay, well, everything here sucks. You kind of want to start with all right, we want to take away the whole idea from your teachers of always saying, well, we're working with what we have because it's what we've got. We're doing good with what we have. But what if we take it away and say, okay, what if you had everything that you needed? And what would your space look like then? What would happen in that? And then also thinking in the background what different theories are, like decluttering a classroom and having that visual clutter being gone, or having calming spaces for anybody and not just neurodiverse students who might need a second to pause and have that calm. And so again, on an overarching planning scale, trying to make it fun and let everybody move the pieces around and see what they could get with what they have right now. So I think that's fun too. But also staying open.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, I love it. What I think is really cool about this is I feel like the industry has, and I had a conversation from another guest where we talked about we're moving away from the why. Like, we feel like the why has kind of been addressed because we've been like, this has been out for like several years of like why we need different learning environments, and now we're getting into more of like the how do we actually do it. Mm-hmm. And it's a really cool like stage right now because we're like in the stage of action. This isn't always like, for the most part, I feel like we're not having to like convince people, to your point of like, this is what you want to accomplish is, does your current space actually accomplish that? Most of the time we're moving to that next stage. What are the things that get you most excited about as kind of a young professional that's saying like, ooh, I can see what's happening and you're going to be, really, you're going to be a big part of this movement that continues to create better learning environments for the next generations.
Yep. Well, I think it also goes back to that how, but I like to try and reframe how questions into what if questions. So what if this happened because XYZ? So what if this because of that questions? And I think it also helps different educators reframe because they understand that their budget is finite. You only have so much. And those what if because conversations integrate research and also multifaceted aspects in the environment where a room could be or even one wall. So if it's a glass wall, it's not only promoting transparency and views to nature for those biophilia aspects, but it's also a marker board. And it's a collaboration space now, and people can write and all of this together in one aspect. So I think that's how we can start looking at some of that as well.
Yeah. What would be your advice that if people can just like stop for a second in the daily grind of everything that everyone is doing, what's the message that you would hope everyone would have that just you think it's going to get us continue down the path of like of improvement, of doing this better?
I would start with not saying no so quickly. So for instance, you want to play a game. So anytime that I say, or I ask you a question, just say yes real quick. So Kevin, do you want to hear a story?
Yes.
Do you want to hear a story about how this girl went to school?
Yes.
Do you want to hear how her school was set in the woods and the woods were just super cool?
Yes.
Do you want to hear about the dog that they found the one time in the woods?
Yeah.
And then, so all yes.
Yeah.
Now, here, I want you, when I ask you a question, to say no instead. So, hey, Kevin, do you want to hear a story about this girl going to school?
No.
Okay. So you can feel the mood right there as well. Just cut off, and it shuts everything down. And so I was at a conference once, and they did this as a big group, and everybody built on with the story, and everybody was involved in the yes, and you could do this, and yes, and then they're like, okay, now we're going to say no. Boom, done. The whole conversation shuts down when there's that no. And there are times as experts where deep down we know this is probably not going to be the way that they're going, but why shut it off? Why shut down an idea that could lead to other ideas and other thought processes, especially so early in the design that it doesn't make sense to say no there, especially, too, when we start thinking about how kids think and how they create and how they imagine, because we've all seen that 2, 3, 4-year-old that's telling you about, oh, yeah, I designed this thing, and it can go and go, woo, in the sky, and it's just all up here, and, you know, we can just jump, and we could touch those clouds, and we can reach here, and I could, like, do this, you know, all these crazy inventions, but nobody is looking at them, hopefully, and going, yeah, that's not going to work, sorry. So we shouldn't be doing that to ourselves early on thinking about what could be and what if questions.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So you're hitting me like the perfect time with this conversation. Our K-12 theme for our team is stories inspire change for 2024.
Nice.
Like that's our whole thing. So we're actually going through storytelling workshops to try to do that, because at the end of the day, like, it has to be fun. It has to be entertaining. So it's fun going through this and trying to figure out what are different techniques to be able to tell that story. And I love that you say that the yes and kind of like those improv tactics that really do kind of foster collaboration, creativity, and kind of pull it out of people. So yeah, I love it.
And two, when you think on it as well, and later on, so let's say we're doing a master planning process, and the end goal of this master plan they know is that they're going to referendum. And maybe let's say that they've failed a referendum in the past. Well, what if we come in instead and we're doing a process that's all engaging and is asking the community questions and gathering data and informing them on ideas and really integrating them into the process versus here comes Mr. and Mrs. Architect and just shoving an idea down their throat. So when we're engaging with them as well, and when you have it become memorable, it becomes actionable. So, because it's personal. So, all three of those end up working together, which is why I also encourage any naysayer to come to anything. Because that naysayer, I want to be my friend because they're vocal, because they don't like something. Well, what if they're informed now? And what if they had a valid reason? And how do we address that up front in the processes versus down the road having so much negative that can't be addressed anymore or wasn't addressed? So they all play a part.
They do. What? All right. So you've been like perfectly able to predict your life up until this point.
No, no, not at all.
So what do those next predictions look like? What do the next 10 years, 10, 20 years look like for you?
I would like to keep pushing at making a difference, and I want to keep helping to inform. So keeping involved in educational adequacy studies and keeping involved in educational commissioning, which is that process at the end where you get all the stakeholders together, because sometimes not every teacher is in the room, but getting them all there and informing them on why decisions were made on their behalf and showing them, this is this great new environment, and now you're not just in a building, but this building can work for you. And this building is here to support you because you're a professional, and like any other professional, you need all of this to work for you so you can do your job at impacting positively on all these generations of kids that come through your classroom. So that'd be great to see that.
Yeah, I love it. All right. Anything I missed I should be asking you about before we wrap up?
Not that I can think of right now.
All right. We'll keep having these conversations. That's what is it's great is I feel like there is this kind of like army of change makers that are coming about, and it's awesome, and it's so awesome, and it's great to see the energy that's coming through, and because I truly believe like we had a lot of years where we were just setting up, like saying like, hey, we need to convince people that we need to challenge the status quo and look at how we do things differently, and it just feels like that action is happening, and there's going to be some really significant changes coming here in the near future, which is what gets me excited. That's why we do what we do. Is we want to provide the best opportunity for every kid.
Yes.
So thank you for the work you're doing. To the listeners, if you're not already a subscriber, just hit that button. Wherever you're listening, hit subscribe. Go to betterlearningpodcast.com. That's the hub for everything. And and continue doing the work you're doing, Kelsey. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Appreciate it too. Thanks for letting me come on.
The views and opinions expressed in the Better Learning Podcast are those of myself as an individual and of my guest, and do not necessarily represent the organizations we work for, the Association for Learning Environments, K-12, Education Leaders Organization, or Second Class Foundation.